Hey, it's Chris. What are we talking about today? We're talking Yomi, but not this Yomi. New Yomi. Yomi 2. Now on crowdfunding from Sirlin Games. What's new? What's different? Are you looking for a head-to-head, tactical, fighter, card-driven aspect game? Do you love dueling games? Do you love your old school Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat on the console, but on the tabletop instead? Are you a BattleCon Exceed Sakura Arms fan? Were you a fan of Yomi, the previous edition? Well, let me tell you why I love Yomi and what you need to know. Yomi 2. Let's go. Yomiing. So in case you're not familiar with the fighting card game genre, there are many takes on it, like I mentioned, your BattleCons, your Yomis, your Exceeds, all of those styles of games with similar overlaps between all of them. Perfect information, less perfect information, spatial arrangement as you're moving back and forth trying to get in range to do your attacks. And then there is also Yomi, which is a combination of several of those iterations and those schemes and mechanics in a more paper, scissors, rock, lizard, Spock manner, if you will, where your general paper, scissors, rock are your attacks, your throws, and your blocks. And they subsequently do the circle that you would expect. Your attacks beat your throws. Your blocks beat your attacks. Your throws beat your blocks. And so those are the combination of things that you are trying to meta bluff as you take from your hand on a turn-by-turn basis, place one card from that hand face down onto the tabletop in front of you, and then simultaneously reveal what you and your opponent have both decided to play, with the winner go the spoils and doing damage until you knock out your opponent and take out all their life points. So that is the general gist of things. This takes a slight twist on things, and this is not just a, you know what, we're going to kind of see how this goes. Yomi 2 has been online on a console version of things being tested by many people. So this iteration in front of me is not just we decided to pull something out of our back pocket. This is tried, tested, and true, let alone the standing on the shoulders of the original Yomi, which had tens of thousands of play tests to balance in the first place. So if that is your consideration nowadays with games of, you know what, I have these asymmetric factions, I have these asymmetric whatevers, this is going to be the creme de la creme in most cases, game-wise. Experience-wise is a whole different attitude, because these games take skill. They take knowledge. Skill being the sense of knowing how to play the game. Knowledge being the when do I apply said skill. And with these fighters, that is half the fun of these asymmetric games, is finding the fighters that are most in tune or in line with you, right? The crazy ones for me. But let's talk about the actual gameplay. Let me show you what it looks like on a turn-by-turn basis. And then let me tell you why more of Yomi is an absolutely amazing thing. What you have in front of you right here is just the very simplistic overview of what you're going to have in the box, essentially. You've got your individual player cards, which list out all of the individual attributes of each player's card, and we'll talk about the elements on a card in a second, because that is probably the most intuitive thing that you're trying to get past as you're developing your learning and going into the learning curve of this game as a whole. The biggest addition are these gems over here, which you incorporate one into your individual player deck, which makes your deck potentially even completely different than someone else who is playing as the Dragon Midori or Degray or Rook, for example. And then you also have the actual cards themselves, the decks in front of me right here. And if you are one of several more complex characters, you may even have a second deck to go along with that. So the game is relatively straightforward. You shuffle up your deck. At the beginning of the game, everybody grabs the 3 same cards from their deck. These 3 identical cards that you're grabbing are a throw, a low block, and a high block. On top of that, you grab your gem burst card, which is going to be unique to whatever color gem you grab for that session. And then, apart from that, after you've taken these 4 cards, you just draw the top 4 cards of your deck, and your starting hand is all set, and you are all ready to go as long as you don't drop cards like I did. And you can start to see how your hand is starting to be more robust. And all of these individual cards are going to have many different aspects. But like I said, the main gist of this game is choosing one of these cards, placing it face down in front of you, and then waiting to reveal simultaneously to your opponent. And these cards are made up of many different aspects, which we'll talk about here right now a second, but let me just show you what types of cards there are first. You have your attack cards, you have more of your dodge cards, you have your ability cards, which are represented up here, and then you also have your throws and your blocks. And most of them, thankfully, so you don't have to intuitive them, tell you exactly what they do. There's not a whole lot of guessing in that regard. Blocks, if you blocked correctly, draw a card, don't take damage, return this to your hand. Some slight nuances depending on the character there, but it's relatively straightforward. High blocks block high attacks, low blocks block low attacks. Dodges, well, we've already talked about those. The numbers, though, you can see in the upper right-hand corner are your damages that you would be dealing if your attack hits, if you paper, scissors, rock your opponent. Now, how do you decide, say, if there's 2 attacks? Because I've already told you that, well, in case of rock, rock, or paper, paper, or scissor, scissor, well, you know, it's obvious that paper is beating rock. It's obvious rock beats scissors. It's obvious if scissors beats paper, but what about when scissors fight scissors? That's where the symbol on the left-hand side over here is the speed of that attack, or the speed of the gem burst, or the speed of the throw, so that you can then use that to decide who wins. The last element on the card, or the second to last element, I should say, the major element that you need to know about is the rest of the iconography underneath the wording up here at the top. And again, this iconography is relatively intuitive because Yomi is not just about meta bluffing, knowing what your opponent is going to do. It's also about the chain comboing that went into a lot of those Street Fighter-esque combo-driven games in order to knock out your opponent. And these dots are representative of that, meaning this is how many parts of my combo that I'm using with this card. And then I can link it to cards that have this as one of their symbols alongside of them to pump up the damage, to make it stronger, to exceed things. Haha. Anyway, so you can see that the medium-high attack here, for example, actually only has 1 dot. So Midori, for example, here at the top of his card, you can see right up there, he has 3 dots, meaning that I can chain up to 3 of these cards. And you'll also notice that C's might link to other letters. And those other letters, if you have them in your hand, give you the other awesome thing about this game is the superpowered super meter that is going to supercharge your super character. And that is going to be how you link cards, but also link damage on top of the 7 that's going to be there. These cards will also have other attributes that will allow you to pump them up, meaning certain symbols, if you discard them, discarding cards or discarding certain cards with certain symbols on them, will do additional damage as part of your combo to a certain limitation. So not only can you link the cards one after another, but you can discard on top of that to do mega ultra combos, you know, ultra instincts, whatever they may be that you are trying to do. Now you might go, okay, well, Chris, that all sounds well and good, but how do you then prevent a runaway leader problem if you're doing that much damage on a single turn-by-turn basis? Well, therein lies the beauty of this game. At the beginning of your turn, you actually draw 2 cards, and you have a hand size limit up to 12 cards. But if you're playing that many cards to combo linked together, guess what? Your cards are going to be depleted rather quickly because they all go to the discard pile after you've used them, whether your attack was successful or you both sort of fizzled out and didn't really do anything as well. And so the replenishing of your hand is going to be a rate limiting step in order to prevent a significant runaway leader, because you're not going to have the cards now because, well, they just played all their attack cards. So I know potentially what they're vulnerable to. Don't I? Don't I? Or if you linked those cards correctly, if you did an A to a B to a C, you're getting your little purple stars here. And these purple stars are the super abilities that I just mentioned, because you have potentially around 2 of these abilities in your deck, which are just massive, that require those ability power-ups in the upper left-hand corner there in order to activate them. And as you can see, these are freaking amazing. Speed 11, strength 10. Oh, you know what? Speed 15. Oh, damage 1. And that's actually because Midori transforms into a freaking dragon. And that's where the second deck comes in, and all of these are overpowered, and it's just freaking amazing. We'll get there in a second, though. And those are the abilities that you're constantly trying to say, how do I do this? Because you also notice they have a no chain symbol, meaning that you cannot link those with other cards. It's a stopper. And so some of these are going to be linkable and combo driven, but some of the ones that might be stronger individually, you don't have to worry about being stopped because they're maybe a little bit faster, or the ones that are going to be easier to combo are going to be a little slower. But can you take that risk if your opponent not only guesses right or even just guesses wrong, but they still outspeed you? And that's also where the gem cards come in. Gem cards are sort of like a get out of jail free card. The rules actually do a very good job of saying this is the playstyle of this character, FYI. This is the playstyle of this gem. This is what you should be thinking about, because that burst card of the gem that you start off with your starting hand, that is your get out of jail card, essentially. It is super fast, but it's also basically your ripcord to avoid getting steamrolled at some point. So once you pull it, baby, there's no unpulling it, and you're going to have to, really go from there without a safety net. So that is an element of things. The last element is the gem card that is just sitting face up in front of me. And this gem card is also sort of your get out of jail free card in a different way, because it's a one-time use. And this is pervasive. And timing is this game in a nutshell with every single aspect. You play this as a one-time ability once per battle. It lasts 2 rounds. And it just exists. So in this case, when the opponent opens with an attack, take 8 damage. They do. And when an opponent opens with a block, they take 4 damage. So this is the catch-up. This is the mitigator. You cannot, however, again, timing-wise, play it if someone else's is still in effect. Another element of things that's part of it is, well, you get the edge. Cards will give you the edge, and all of your attacks all of a sudden become faster, or you knock down your opponent. And because of the knockdown, their dodges are disabled, and your attacks now become speed 10 if they're less than speed 10 when they're knocked down. And so you are really playing an advantage. You are getting an advantage, but you still, even as the person knocked down, are not without options to deal with that. But again, it's a game of cat and mouse, tactically driven, card-based simultaneous reveal, and it's freaking awesome. So let's pretend for a second I'm playing Valerie versus Midori. We both lay our cards down, and we both flip them face up, and oh, it's an attack! You can see, okay, 7 damage, 3 damage. This little blue modifier in the lower right of that damage means that even if you block it, you're still going to take that amount of damage. You can see that they're both X labeled attacks, and speed kills, right? Valerie's is only 7. She can combo up to 6 dots with her character, and this would count for 2 of them as you're showing a stopper symbol there. But you could also pump this up twice more for 7 damage. And so although it's a stopper, you may be able to get much more damage even if you can't combo it as much. However, the flurry punches here is quicker and is going to actually beat it out, and could also be comboed potentially as a linker card to another main attack, another linker card, or even a stopper card, as well as could be pumped up. And so that is what you're doing, and the throws, the dodges, and the super abilities just interact in the same way. There are levels of, say, attacks or projectiles that will determine, essentially, because some of the speeds are similar, that will trump over the other. But that is the whole gist of the game, is just flip it over and compare. Now, I have a total of 6 different gems and 10 different characters that were sent to me to try out. And you have your run-of-the-mill, you have your straightforward, you have the things or the tropes that you would expect, the heavy brawler who's slow but does a ton of damage, and the speed attacks might not do a whole lot to him, and he's going to bash you anyway, no matter what, even if you outspeed him in some ways. You've got the, ranged fighters. You've got the projectiles. But then, the awesome thing about this game, and the thing I love about all of the games in these types, even, your dice thrones or your unmatched, the crazier, the better. The more chaotic, the better. And I got that, right? I got that in Midori, who has 2 separate decks, and he transforms into the dragon, and everything's overpowered, but it only lasts for 3 rounds, and you better take advantage. Otherwise, some of the other stuff isn't quite as good because he's so honorable. He doesn't want to take the easy route to defeat the enemy. And then I also have Lum the Panda here, who has a whole separate item deck, where a lot of its abilities are based off of matching symbols at the bottom of the cards that aren't on any other cards, and then you sort of do the lottery slot machine sort of thing and see what item pops out, and it might be good for you, it might be good for your opponent, it might be freaking awesome all over the place, chaos everywhere, reigning supreme. And it's a hell of a lot of fun, but you can take it as seriously as you want to, but you can also just have a lot of fun. Unlike Senjutsu, where, you know, it was a swing and miss. Unlike the spatial elements of your BattleCons or your Exceeds, you don't worry about that. It is just, can I outthink? Can I outbluff? And can I anticipate what you're going to play in a unique way? And that's not even going into the other main mitigation of this. As you're potentially trying to get these all so valuable purple stars, you're having ways to mitigate those and get those to get into, say, the dragon form, which I can't even freaking pick up. But, you know, the only ways to get these is to combo, right, Chris? No! You have the all-important exchange ability, which a lot of your basic cards at the bottom of them will have right down here. Because once a turn, you can play an ability card, like I showed you. Once a turn, you can take one of these exchange cards and take it and put it in your discard pile to get something else back with the exchange. Because if you have two cards of the same type in your hand, with the same name, same named cards, you discard them both. And that allows you to do one of two things. One, get two of these all precious power-up stars, or 1 star and one of your superpower cards that starts off in the discard, because you have 2 copies of each of these in your deck, and one of each of them starts in the discard pile. So maybe you can't draw it, but boy howdy, can you grab it? And so those are the timing elements. They just grabbed it from their pile. Are they going to be playing it the next turn? They still have a star meter to be able to do it. Or are they going to wait? Are they aware that I'm going to think that they're going to play it, so they're not going to play it? Or are they going to think that I'm not going to think that, or going to think that they're going to play it and I'm not going to play it? Those are the types of conversations and situations running through your head in this game. And ultimately, the enjoyment factor of this, even though the combo system is still slightly rough around the edges in terms of just getting used to linking and how you link and what's important to link versus exchanging, the timing is impeccable. The timing is important, and the timing is, at the end, the make it or break it. The gems are nice. I definitely prefer a couple of the gems more than others. I can't speak to balance in this. The fighters are incredible. Again, it's a skill experience thing rather than these powers are, that much different in more of a BattleCon-esque way, without still losing some of the creative chaos that you're trying to do with the Paper, Scissors, Rock, Lizard, Spock situation along the way that the abilities and the gems and the supercharged attacks give you as well. But I definitely still find that a couple of these gems, like the red gem, the fire gem, for example, suits my playstyle. So will you find one that suits your playstyle, ultimately, is what you have to ask yourself. Now, who's going to like this? Who's not going to like this? Well, I think I've already covered the who's going to like this with all of the descriptors and, the way I've described it already, right? If you are a fan of these fighting dueling games, this is another great iteration of things. And again, this isn't sort of, I wonder what the final product is going to be looking like, because it's already on, I think, Steam at the time of me filming this for, like say a year. This has been tried, tested, and just played out so that it can be fine-tuned before it comes into this physical form of things. The thing that you will not like is because it is a paper, scissors, rock. BattleCon is more of your perfect information. Exceed is going to be more streamlined, but it has positional awareness that is going to matter. This has neither of those to either extent. The Exceed cards are a little more multi-purpose, depending on the season, but at the same time, a little bit less too, because of the way you can combo this and exchange them and even trash them if you need to. And so that is just something to be aware of. Who's not going to like this? Again, if you're looking for perfect control, this is not your game. If you're looking for not bluffing at all, of just playing and seeing who clashes, right? That's Exceed. The first one is BattleCon. This is offering something different in the trifecta of those 3 pillars of the fighting card game community that the previous one offered, but this one is now providing in an upgraded, streamlined, potentially slightly more intuitive way, if you ask me. I like the gems. It's your get out of jail free card. I like having a little bit less of the sort of poker numbers style of things. The comboing is a little bit easier and straightforward for my jagged edged brain to deal with. So ultimately, do I love this? Yes, I freaking love this. The biggest concern I have is price point with something like this. This is a card game. And I think the price is going to be, or what I've seen on crowdfunding is probably a little bit expensive for what a card-driven, asymmetric faction/fighter game we've seen elsewhere go for. You know, I think of the core baseline of something like, well, an Exceed box, you know, $25, $29 for 4 fighters. I think of Summoner Wars 2, which will maybe run you 40 for about 6. And those are the comparisons that I have to make head to head. And so if this is going to be significantly more, not that that's necessarily, you know, apples to apples. It's not, but it's still fruit to fruit in a way. And the more important thing ultimately is that no matter how good of a deal it is this your preferred type of mechanic as a head-to-head dueler? That's what matters. If it's not, no amount of price in terms of being cheap is good. If this is a great fit, then sometimes, as weird as this is, and as often as I find myself saying this, but also not saying it, paying a little bit more for a game that fits you as well, that really fits you, is sometimes worth it, right? Paying more for a game that gets played more is worth it, but it has to be for you, not for anybody else or an endorsement otherwise. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't mind a few extra little keywords there. I wouldn't mind a few more player characters overall. I just want a ton of craziness to go with it. And at the same time, having less of those keywords also makes it a more easily approachable and understandable game when I'm not constantly looking up the first, second, or even the third game, what that keyword does, how that's different for each character, or what nuance it is because your wording in this game is not as intuitive as it should be because you decided to use your own terminology for common things in other games that wasn't completely necessary in the first place. And so at the same time, as much as I love the knockdown and the edge and would love to see, you know, half a dozen more of those elsewise, sometimes, again, less is more because that also means more play, less overhead. So that is Yomi 2. Now it has a solo mode. It has a co-op mode. I have a whole set of other boards over here that are the bot, essentially, where you roll a die and depending on the hand size, you go row and column and it tells you what it does and how you're going to potentially decide to block it or not. And then cooperatively, you can do that with 2 people. But ultimately, as straightforward and streamlined as that is, this is at its heart still, for me, about outplaying, outmaneuvering, outskilling your opponent, not an AI system for me. So there you go. Sirlin Games sent me Yomi 2 to talk about, and I have a type, and this is it. So any questions, comments, or concerns down below, hit me up. Subscribe, Patreon me. Have a great freaking fantastic day. Stay classy. Peace out.